Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Smarter Sourcing. I could not be more excited to participate in this for two reasons. One, because I'm a guest host covering this week for John Pavia, and two, because we have Tim Johnson here to share with us the perspective of a CFO on building a cost-focused culture. Tim, do you mind if I call you TJ as we go through this?
Absolutely. Please do.
All right. So, TJ, I'd love people to get to know you first before we dive in. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you go to school?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Steve. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this for a while. And a little bit about me. So I grew up in Ohio, went to Miami of Ohio for school, took my first job in Columbus, Ohio, and we've been there ever since. So my wife and I, Christine, have been married almost 34 years. We have 3 adult children, 29, 25, and 22. And all are in Columbus or close to Columbus, and couldn't be more excited about that. I recently retired from
Congratulations.
Secret. Thank you. On May 31, after more years than I care to count in the retail and finance arena. I was most recently CFO and CAO at Victoria's Secret for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was at Big Lots for almost 20 years, retiring around 2019. And then further back in my career, also retail focused with The Limited. And long ago, I started out in public accounting. So I started out as an accountant. I do have my CPA, which you know what that means, right?
Yes, I think so.
No, couldn't pass again. Couldn't pass again today. But back then it was pretty important to me. So, accounting was something that I gravitated towards at an early age. Studied that in school, started out in public accounting. Another fun fact, you're learning all kinds of things today, Steve. Fun fact, started in public accounting on 7/28/89. I remember that date because I met my wife, my future wife, that date.
Excellent.
We met at work. And as I mentioned, have been married almost 34 years now. So that's a little bit, probably more than you wanted to know, but
no, that's wonderful. What a wonderful career.
About the Johnson crew.
You weren't being completely honest when you said you're retired. I think you're serving on multiple boards right now. Is that correct?
I am. I'm retired from the day-to-day.
Okay.
But I've found actually 4 different companies and a not-for-profit that I truly enjoy spending time with in spaces that are, things I understand or things I'm passionate about. So primarily a retail focus. So I do sit on the board at Brinker International, which is the parent company of Chili's and Maggiano's.
Yep.
Dollar Tree stores. I think everybody's probably heard of Dollar Tree.
Absolutely.
The discount stores, coast to coast. I recently went on the board at Pet Supplies Plus,
Okay.
The largest franchise of pet stores in the U.S. And then I work with you and Dave and Colin and the team at LogicSource, which I couldn't be more thrilled about. A family passion led us to Nationwide Children's Hospital, where I actually sit on the foundation board and have for the last 10 years. So
that's wonderful.
It does keep me challenged, keeps me sharp, still allows enough time for playtime and golf and family and other things and travel. But I do like the new pace of being recently retired.
And I understand you're an Ohio State Buckeyes fan?
The Ohio State, yes.
The Ohio State Buckeyes, yes.
Absolutely.
That's right. So obviously you've accomplished a tremendous amount through your career. Would you say that this podcast right now on Smarter Sourcing is the pinnacle of that career?
100%. I mean, prior to this, it was when we did the town hall a couple months ago, but this definitely outperforms.
We keep raising the bar together.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things that I really wanted to focus on, TJ, are, really in your role as a CFO, how you built a cost-conscious culture. You seemed always very focused on how to bring your organization together to focus on costs, and maybe just spend a bit of time on that.
Yeah, I think, hopefully over the course of my career, I left an impression that, I wanted to be the CFO that didn't say no all the time, but instead really challenged the organization to consistently get better. So what does that look like? That looks like, making sure we're doing the right things from an accounting perspective or finance perspective, keeping the company, in good stead in that way. However, I think the role as a CFO is broader than that. You're a strategic business partner to the CEO and hopefully a trusted and credible resource for your board as well. And sometimes that means that you need to make tough calls, and tough calls could look like keeping costs in check so that you can fund growth or you can fund innovation in other areas. And sometimes it's, so you can improve the profitability or the profile of the company. So it's not always a matter of saying no. It's not always a matter of cutting costs. It's a matter of where can you put your resources to best use, knowing full well that, companies thrive when they're growing, companies thrive when they're innovating. And sometimes those activities take investment, and you have limited resources. So you have to figure out a way to make it all work in kind of the grander scheme of what the strategy is calling for.
Right.
So I've always enjoyed that to an extent. Yes, there's tough conversations there. I've been in businesses where margins are very high and you have a little more latitude. And I've been in businesses where margins are very thin and you don't have as much room to move. But I've always found that if you do the work up front, if you collaborate with your teams and your business partners, help everybody understand the bigger picture of why you're doing what you're doing. Most people want to be on a winning team.
Right.
And sometimes to win, you got to be a little more frugal than you might otherwise think.
You made the point that cost-focused culture isn't about just cutting budget. It's about finding that right balance of costs and investment and innovation. I know you've always brought business leaders from across the business to engage in that process, that whole idea of how do I get multiple people invested in thinking about cost? Maybe just talk a little bit about how you built that collaboration and that culture.
No, that's a good point. I think, starting from the beginning, making sure that you have, I'll say, objective, real data on where your business is at the moment, or what problem are you trying to solve through collaboration with your teams. And sometimes that looks like investments you want to make, and sometimes that looks like where you have to be a little tighter on costs. But either way, I've found that over the course of my career, everybody wants to be on a winning team. Everybody comes into work wanting to win every day. And if you can be convincing with people that collaboration is the best way to get there and that they understand the journey that you want to go on, I think that's kind of step one. I think step two is once you have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, getting that objective view. And sometimes that's third-party views, like what LogicSource brings to the table in indirect procurement. And sometimes it's, other work that people bring outside perspectives into the business to help you understand where are you really? Because it's sometimes companies can be very insulated and think that they're doing everything perfectly, even though I've yet to find the perfect company. But making sure that you've got objective third-party data to help make decisions, or know where to go to find your answers. So I think specifically as it relates to cost and the work we did together at LogicSource, it was really making sure that our leaders in the business understood what good looked like in all areas of business when it comes to spending money and what you're getting in return. And once you understand that, then you can have good collaborative decisions with your business partners to say, I've got an opportunity here, I've got an opportunity there. It's your business. I want to understand from you how you're thinking about these opportunities. And if you don't like them for one reason or another, what's your idea? Because now I know what good looks like.
Yes.
And if you have another way to get there, I'm all ears. But at the same time, we have to get there together.
Right.
So I think collaboration up front on what you're trying to solve, making sure you have objective third-party data, and then really making sure you have a process to measure results. Because nothing's worse than thinking you have an opportunity to do something, putting it in the budget, and then it kind of disappears sometimes. So making sure you have accountable, detailed reporting on how you're really doing against those goals, whether it's saving money or driving revenue or driving innovation, whatever it may be. But in this case, driving efficiency in the business to support future growth.
TJ, I want to spend a bit of time on kind of the whole indirect spend, or in your retail world, not for resale spend. Obviously, when you look at costs, you're looking at everything, and headcount, merchandise for resale costs, and indirect. there's some unique complexity in indirect. It's, everyone spends money on it. It's kind of everywhere, but maybe share with us your perspective on kind of what makes it challenging to manage that spend, and what are some best practices you've seen?
Yeah, I think, taking a big step back, it is important, as you mentioned, to make sure everybody understands what is this indirect thing you speak of.
Yeah.
What is this goods not for resale that you speak of? And in my world, and the way I would explain it to teams or people who are interested in it, in retail, you have merchandise and you have people. It's not that, but it's everything else that you spend money on.
Right.
So it can be technology, it can be marketing, it can be logistics, it could be, trash, it can be store maintenance, it can be store construction. There's a whole myriad of different disciplines in the business that have a budget, that have money to spend, that have authorization to do so. And sometimes that responsibility or visibility over that can get difficult when you sit in a chair as CFO and you're not seeing every transaction every day, not having full visibility, and that can be tough.
Right.
And sometimes, you've got people that have quite large budgets that you also have quite large jobs. And, this isn't something that somebody can do off the corner of their desk. Right. So again, making sure that you've got a good view of what good looks like.
Yes.
And you can hold your teams accountable to that, I think is critically important in the indirect space. And then I think just, sometimes it's difficult as a leader in the business. You want to be supportive of your teams, and everybody's working incredibly hard to try to drive the outcome.
Right.
But sometimes you have to help them understand they have one lens into spending money.
Right.
And that's the lens at the company that they're at.
Right.
And looking for opportunities from LogicSource or other providers to really have a wider aperture. We used to talk about, we were episodic at Big Lots when I was there. We would go to market when we needed something.
Right.
And while the teams worked really, really hard at it, and it was one of the most frugal bunch of people that I ever worked with in my career, because we had to be, they only have one view into it. Whereas, a LogicSource may have done the same kind of look into it 20 different times this year. So whether it's, looking at bank fees, whether it's looking at trash hauling, whether it's looking at packaging or bags, shopping bags, all those kind of things that retailers have, in my experience, we were doing it once and LogicSource had already done it many times.
Right.
Alongside of that, we had the vendors that we tended to like to work with, and they were trusted business partners, and all of that's true. But making sure that we understand where are those vendors relative to the competition? Where are those vendors in quality relative to the competition? Right. Are our vendors financially stable? Are there others in the environment that we should be looking at to drive value? So it's just that broader perspective of how to run indirect procurement and how to be best at indirect procurement. Data is currency. Vendor quality and viability is currency. And again, it's hard to do that as a company of one.
Right. We, in talking to companies not at the scale of some of the firms that or retailers that you've worked at, one of the things they talk about is the challenge in that cultural shift, getting people who own their marketing or their IT or their store construction to kind of partner with this sourcing and procurement group. And I think you did a way of making people feel really comfortable, that they wanted to be part of that journey. Maybe just talk about how you brought them into the tent. And
I think first off, it starts with transparency. And as we talked about, making sure you've got clear goals that everybody is working towards and you're measuring against those goals. You remember you guys were in my office, once a week for many, many months on end when we had projects going on. So we had accountability between each other, but it also allowed me to bring leaders in as things either got ahead of plan to the good, or where we were trailing to understand kind of what help that they needed. And most people, again, want to be on a winning team. Most people want to deliver upon their goals. And for one reason or another, they can get off track. So how do we get back on track together? Right. I think additionally, more often than not, when you go through a process of looking at your spend, more often than not, you end up staying with the vendors that you currently have. Right. You just ultimately do a little bit better
Right.
on price or delivery or service or value or terms of your agreement, whatever that may be. So our teams appreciated the fact that, there was an opportunity for us to have continuity of relationship with
Right.
our vendors and just do it in a way where it was more beneficial for the company. And then I think the last thing is being really, really direct. It's a whole lot easier. If we have goals as a company that we're trying to solve, it's a whole lot easier for us to work together and try to figure out how to work better with our vendor partners to achieve those goals rather than, you mentioned headcount earlier.
Right.
It's like, I'd rather have a conversation about how do we get better with our vendors than how do we look at, a lower headcount.
Absolutely.
That's a very, I'd say just on a human front, that's a much easier path
Right.
to be collaborative and working with vendors and leaders rather than having to, look at headcount.
You hit on a few times the idea of value beyond savings, that, sourcing is driving savings, but you hit on mitigating risk and assuring quality and customer experience. Maybe just talk about where you see the big value levers around managing spend successfully.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. So I'll use an example of, during my time at Big Lots, we had a very significant store remodel program, hundreds of stores. And, the last thing you want to do is close down a store for a handful of days to remodel the store, only to have the vendor not deliver or the construction team not show up or the general contractor, go down a different path. So really understanding kind of the partners that you're working with and the quality that they're delivering. It's not just a price conversation, but it's a business risk. It's a business interruption.
Right.
Imagine launching an initiative like that when you're going to grand reopen an entire market of stores, only have 2 or 3 of them not be complete because, you had the wrong contractor on something. So I think the vendor quality, helping to mitigate business risk, super important. Yes, the savings are nice and that's what shows up well, but continuity of initiatives and making sure you get all of them on the timeline and on budget is super important because, in my world, retail was very much on a calendar. I mean, there's seasons to it, and if you miss a season, it's pretty expensive. So play that out. Imagine you were reopening a market in September or October, right before Halloween, and you had 2 or 3 stores that didn't make it, but you got all this Halloween stuff, and that day's over on October 31st. That
you miss it.
Turns to worms, so to speak. So there's a lot of reasons why vendor quality and delivery is important.
And I know you've always viewed whether it's your internal resources or third parties that you're working with on indirect as the right strategic partner to have a seat at the table to help you balance all of those trade-offs versus just, it's a buying department that sits in the basement and issues POs. You always viewed it as a much more strategic role.
100%. You'll recall during the time we worked together at Big Lots, we actually had LogicSource people sitting at the table as business decisions were getting made. So they were viewed as one of the team, and that's super important because we could play the telephone game.
Yeah, exactly.
Every second or third person you tell something to gets diluted, right? So having a seat at the table for the procurement team so that they can understand what the business is trying to accomplish and on the timelines and what kind of delivery they need from their vendor partners.
Right.
Super important. And just in real time, no lost time. And you move quickly with speed.
One of the areas I just want to talk about is kind of organizational structure and where it sits. We, across all kinds of companies, we see indirect procurement reporting into who knows where, operations, IT sometimes.
That's an interesting one.
Finance tends to be the place where we see it having the strongest fit, and clearly that was always the case with you. Maybe just spend a bit of time on why you think that linkage is so important.
Yeah, I've seen it operate differently in different environments, both at companies I worked at and in companies that I'm now affiliated with, not working with every day. I do believe the best home for it is in finance. I believe that there's an importance around kind of the analytical rigor, the measuring, inspect what you expect, and make sure that you're getting the true savings. It's flowing through the P&L, or it's being delivered on time. So I think accountability, measurement, rigor around the details is super important. And that's typically what finance people are best at, more so than IT or legal or other places that I've heard it, report into. So I do believe, again, as CFO, you're a strategic business partner to the CEO. You're not just keeping score, but you're holding people accountable to major initiatives, major cost initiatives, major delivery initiatives, reinvestments back into the business. And I think procurement has a way of weaving through all of those.
I know you've seen a lot of different ways that it can be managed, whether it's an internal team or decentralized in business departments or a third party that's supporting indirect. And I know a lot of times you look at, in-source, outsource decisions. Why would you say indirect was an area where you think having some outside help is beneficial?
100%. I do think it's super helpful. As we talked about earlier, I do think that kind of third-party view of the world or outside-in information is super important.
Right.
And we were episodic, as I mentioned.
Yes.
Whereas someone like LogicSource, had been to market 20 times more than we had.
Sure.
So you just have better data. My teams sometimes would struggle with that, but really, it's not a fair fight.
Right.
I mean, data is currency. You have $150 billion and counting of currency kind of running through your systems that you understand where the best prices are, not just on an item, but maybe where they are in the country, regional pricing, just a number of different ways that a company of one is never going to want to source to that.
Yes.
Meaning we would never want to put an organization in place that could deliver that. It would take way too much time, way too many people, it would cost way too much.
Yeah.
And slow down the organization. I think, again, I'll use my example as a retailer. We want to be best at merchandise. We want to be best at customer experience and delivery of that. I don't want to build an organization that's best at indirect procurement.
Right.
I know I can go out and find those services. They exist through LogicSource. And, for me, I want the business to focus on the core that's going to really generate revenue, generate innovation, generate stakeholder growth, whether that's shareholders or in a private company situation or for your associates.
Right. I wanted to shift gears from retail for a minute. I know most of your career has been in retail, but you mentioned serving on the board of trusts for the foundation for a hospital system. I know you, as chairman of the board at LogicSource, they're making inroads in healthcare.
Yep.
Just in your experience and what you've seen, how do you think other industries like healthcare can benefit from kind of the journey retail's been on around indirect or goods not for resale?
I think there's a lot of similarities. That's what I'm finding. So most of my career was spent in specialty retail or discount retail. Just something as simple as when I went on the board at Brinker, which is the parent company of Chili's, the restaurant chain. And it was a little bit different, but then again, it wasn't. I mean, they have product.
Right.
They have innovation. They have people. They're delivering a customer experience. Right. And then they have stuff in the background what they spend money on. Right. And are they being as efficient as they can be? That's really the question. So in a hospital situation, my daughter works at Nationwide Children's. My second daughter is in medical school. So and I've spent a lot of time with the foundation. It's a passion of our family. They have product that they deliver in the form of services. They have customers. They have people. And then they have a lot of other stuff that they spend money on. So I could pull my laptop out today and you couldn't tell me if it's a retail laptop or a healthcare laptop.
Absolutely, right.
Or, we have auditors. They have auditors. They have construction, the massive construction projects going on in hospital systems like Nationwide and others. We have construction from a retail perspective. So outside of those core competencies that they're best at, they do spend money elsewhere. Right. And what I've come to appreciate is we spend money on a lot of the same things. So why wouldn't those same principles apply? And I think that's what some of the early customer wins in the healthcare vertical at LogicSource are telling us.
Gotcha. It seems like they're very constrained profitability wise, obviously hospital systems. So what they can learn from other industries and benchmarks and data can be really valuable.
100%.
Yeah.
No different than, again, other industries, right? So whether it's tariffs that are impacting businesses in different ways, they impact hospital systems or healthcare.
Yes.
Whether it's the big, beautiful bill, which can impact businesses, can
Yes.
also impact health. So they have a lot of the same challenges as other companies that you at LogicSource already deal with.
Right.
Why wouldn't this work for them? It will. It has already.
So if you could give advice to brand new CFOs on kind of how to prioritize their focus around this cost-centric culture, but what are some of the tips you'd give?
You first of all understand the landscape that you're dealing with that's in front of you. Good, bad, or indifferent. It can always be better. I'm working with businesses that are truly growing by leaps and bounds right now, and some businesses that are more challenged.
Right.
And both have opportunities. So recognize your business opportunities for what they are. It's a way for finance to get involved to help drive a business outcome. So your teams want to be part of winning.
Right.
So give your team a chance. So I think that's the first thing. Understand the landscape. I think the second thing is make sure you have current, real, objective data to make decisions on.
Right.
And not just the opinion of the teams that have been around for a while or been doing it consistently for a while, but how do you go outside of your sphere of business and understand what's possible? So I think that's super important. I think partnering with your other executive team leaders, including your CEO, to help them understand what you're trying to accomplish and take their ideas on how you might be able to accomplish it, knowing that you have ideas of your own.
Right.
But in order to really move things forward and get the most out of those ideas, you're going to want and need everybody's help around the table. And then I think, the fourth thing is making sure that the business really understands your objective as a CFO.
Yes.
And sometimes it is putting more money in the bank. Sometimes you need to put more money in the bank. Sometimes you need to generate cash flow for one reason or another. But more often than not, you should have an opportunity to help the company thrive and grow and innovate and increase its relevancy in the marketplace. Right. It's becoming more and more challenging every day to do business, regardless of the vertical that you're in. So how can you, again, provide for growth, provide for innovation, and increase your relevancy with customers?
You spoke a lot about just access to information and data and being able to make decisions based on that. That's more and more important now when we see, artificial intelligence and speed of things. Maybe just speak to why it is so important to have partners or internal capabilities around that access to information and access to data.
I'm aware of, we're developing a lot of tools inside of LogicSource to benchmark data and using data more robustly and using AI functionality more robustly to help us get to answers quicker. The environment's not going to sit still for anybody, whether you're in retail, healthcare, or somewhere in between. So I think the speed and accuracy and actionable nature of information is only going to increase in relevancy.
Right.
I think this next generation of leaders have already started to grow up with that expectation and those skills. So I think for those businesses that are not embracing or not innovating, they're going to fall behind. It's my opinion. I'm sure there will be plenty of examples of that. But I think the last thing I would say is just, the outside in, third party, objective view of performance will always have value, should always have value to a CFO in order to hold your teams accountable, be able to communicate to your stakeholders, and hopefully drive value for the company or for the firm, for your associates go forward.
You hit on execution a lot and delivering that value. There are some wonderful consulting firms who offer tremendous advice, but maybe aren't there through the finishing of achieving that. I know for you, it was always important to partner with firms that were there through the realization of all of that value.
Absolutely. There's no shortage of good ideas out there or no shortage of ideas out there. I'd say what there's often a shortage of is people willing to roll up their sleeves and help you get the job done.
Right.
Because just because you identify an opportunity that might be bigger than the bread box doesn't mean that you have the resources internal to get it all done. So you need a partner who's going to help you get it done. And some partners do, and many partners don't. my experience with LogicSource was, they were right there in the trenches with our team, rolling their sleeves up, helping us buy better.
Great.
They weren't leaving us with a to-do list or leaving us with decks on what we ought to do. They were helping us do what we needed to do.
That's great. TJ, you talked a lot about kind of getting stakeholders to buy into looking at vendors differently and evaluating. Any stories you can share on, things that opened your eyes as part of this sourcing process or surprised you?
Yeah, we learned a ton. We learned a ton for sure. And some things will surprise you. And anytime you kind of look under the hood, after not looking under the hood for a long time, you're surprised what you see. I'm reminded of a couple of things. I can remember conversations, I won't name a vendor or a category, where there was an unusual amount of pushback on the part of the team to really look deep. And this company has been a trusted partner of ours for many, many years, and they help us out when we need help. And we've been in tough spots, and they've always been there for us. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that's how we reward people is with business over time. But interestingly enough, when we did the benchmark data on said partner, we found out our trusted partner for many years had been probably 40-50% of our market. So it just begs the question, right? On how much you really know sometimes about your partners when you're dealing with them one-on-one. And that's where I'll always look back to having that outside in view on the landscape and the options available for you to go to market. More often than not, it leads you back to the vendor partners that you've had for many, many years. And sometimes it highlights for you with bright lights why you need to make a change.
Yeah, hard to be a great partner when you're that out of market, I guess. But
and I think there's I'm also reminded by, I mentioned earlier, we did some sort of remodel work for many years. And I think it's important bringing in outside perspectives sometimes. So, we actually would close the store and do work overnight, or sometimes close the store during the day if we needed to. And the cycle time on getting stores done just kept expanding and expanding. Well, when you can bring in outside perspectives from a firm like LogicSource, who's remodeled more stores than we have, we were able to actually set up, I'll call them regional type mini supply centers, to make sure we had everything we needed close by to that store to allow us to move with speed and get things done more quickly, versus having send everything from Columbus, Ohio, or somewhere far away.
Interesting.
And wait on delivery time. So
you'd find available space in the market area.
Available space in the market. Could be a closed store in the same center where you just rent it for pennies on the dollar for a couple of weeks or whatever you need. Point being, having outside in views can help you on costs. It can help you on vendor quality. It can help you on creative ideas on how to go to market. It can help you understand who's doing well in the market and should you stay with them or not. There's a lot of dollar value you can gain. There's a lot of intangible value that you can gain by getting some outside help every once in a while.
Yeah, what a great story. We started off our session and we talked about certainly publicly traded CFO with some very large companies, not exactly retired now, serving on boards and including chairing the LogicSource board. So having sat on the client side, where you worked with companies like LogicSource to now sitting on the board, maybe what's been eye-opening to you, or what's surprised you a bit sitting on this side of the table?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying sitting on the other side of the table. I'm learning a ton. These are businesses that I wasn't involved in day to day, like I was at Victoria's Secret or Big Lots or other places. So it's really interesting for me to be kind of the person no longer on the inside, but I'm on the outside looking in to really try to understand, how can I help? How can I provide value? So I'm really enjoying that.
Right.
And then specifically as it relates to the LogicSource, I knew this kind of intuitively during my time sitting in the chair, so to speak. But it's really been driven home much more for me, just how hard sometimes people have to work to convince you to want to save money and how difficult it is sometimes to, CFOs in particular, you have things coming at you all day. Every day.
Yes.
And, if I showed you my inbox on any given day, and the number of people that I just need 15 minutes.
Right, absolutely.
That's all I would do. So I get it. I understand how it's hard to kind of get to taking a meeting or to get to making a decision. Sometimes that you got competing priorities. So I think that's where I can help, hopefully with LogicSource, and being able to be that retired or the old guy who used to do the same job, to say you just need to give them a chance. You just need to look at the landscape. It's on their dime. Why wouldn't you want to have a free look at how you're doing?
Right. Well, definitely not the old guy, but the retired guy. So listen, I have to say thank you. As a guest host, I could not be more fortunate to have you as the person I get to interview. I know you and I plan to wear matching sports coats.
Absolutely.
I think the jury probably has returned that you wore it better than I did. But I want to thank you. And I think this was a great session. So appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.